Appreciate it. That's all you get.
Never see the sign.
All right, thank you all so much for being here this evening. You know that there were some folks in traffic. And we will give them a little grace to get here, but we will go ahead and get started. I foresee us having more rich debate. And we have some documents to reference in front of us to help guide our conversation. And we will try and do our best to come to some sense of recommendations provided for to provide for the council. We are going to open this evening up with remarks from our subject matter experts. Attorney Jowers.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address the task force. I'm Kay Jowers. I'm the director of a program called Just Environments at Duke University. It's a program that's shared between the Keenan Institute for Ethics and the Nicholas Institute for Energy, Environment, Sustainability. And while I am trained as an attorney, I'm not here in my capacity necessarily as an attorney. My employer had actually employed me as a social science researcher under my PhD in sociology. And I run a research program that addresses issues of environmental justice with using a research justice lens. We define environmental justice to include housing and housing affordability. And we use multiple methods. We use community-led participatory methods. We use computational approaches and qualitative approaches to conduct our research. We generally do the research in collaborative teams with other PhDs. So Dr. Furlock and I collaborate quite a bit. We also have collaborators at the University of Wisconsin. Our collaborator at the University of Wisconsin is at the business school and runs a center on affordable housing analysis, an economist. So in sum, we have a lot of academic expertise analyzing issues of affordable housing and social justice. And we also work with community co-creators to ensure that our research questions are tailored in ways that are informed by the community expertise. Our primary community partner in our work in analyzing housing issues in Durham has been Communities in Partnership that's led by Cameron Smith. We have also worked with other community organizations. So I want to back up and explain my understanding of the main arguments on both sides. And this may take us back to the higher level. And I know we're trying to get into the specifics, but just wanted to make sure I could explain what we could offer. So from what I understand, the proposal proponents want to increase the number of houses on the market that will reduce competition, housing prices stabilize, and this in turn will maintain or provide some affordable housing. And so the evidence supplied for this, I have seen the stack of papers that Mr. Chapman provided. I am going through that. As I go through it, I'm looking for peer-reviewed article references, not news, not white papers. And I'm also looking to see that the context in which that research were done match the state of North Carolina, where we have a lot of state laws that preempt the ability of local governments to utilize certain mechanisms to provide affordable housing. The opponents say that building more houses may be necessary but not sufficient. And the evidence presented has been the lived experience of community members. And I believe that, that in and of itself has value. However, I know decision makers also like numbers, statistics, and quantified things. So we wanted to make sure that we mentioned that we have skills at evaluating these things that we could offer to the task force or to the UDO process. And last meeting, Councilwoman Freeman offered up a proposal that the properties that are ready to go forward, the projects that are ready to go forward that the proponents are referencing could be put forward as an experiment and be evaluated. So we wanted to point out that that is something that if it were done, we could help evaluate, because we have been evaluating for the past several years different projects and proposals that have been adopted in Durham. We had only had the data through 2016. And as you all know, The landscape in Durham has changed dramatically since 2016, but we recently got the updated data through 2023, the second quarter of 2023, which gives us micro data at the household level on race, wealth, and income, whether children are present, and a number of other factors. We also have the universe of rental listings so that we could see at what price rental units were listed. That microdata is with Dr. Spurlock at UNC. She could speak to the years. Our housing data on households goes back to 2006. And we also, when we combine that with the universe of deeds and transactions in Durham, we can trace what happens when people are displaced by different policies. Where they go? Do they have longer commute times? What are they exposed to in terms of increased or decreased environmental exposures, school quality, crime? We can also look at whether certain stakeholders that are addressing affordable housing are preserving it over time. We have students who have pulled the deeds and are assessing whether or not those deeds have restrictions in them that will preserve future affordability. We have also been assessing whether or not the ADUs that have been built since 2019 have been used as affordable housing, or are they listed as short-term rentals? So we have teams of students and researchers working on those things. We cannot get it done in the time frame of this task force. We should have the preliminary results early next year, and we thought it would be unfortunate if we didn't tell you that this is coming and you were to make a recommendation to the council and we will have this evaluation before to inform a decision fairly shortly. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Attorney Jarvis. Dr. Spurlock, what we were doing was opening up with remarks from you and Attorney Jarvis, just pertaining to your conversation on why you're here. If you'd like to share some opening remarks.
Thank you to the task force for this opportunity. Quite selfishly, this is an amazing experience and opportunity, not just for my students, but for what could really inform the rest of the country when we think about development management ordinances and development management ordinance that provide not just more housing, but more affordable housing. There aren't a lot of successful models throughout the country. There's a number of places that are part of a growing peer-reviewed literature that are showing that some of that turning back the clock on single-family housing, on parking minimums, is not having the effect that we hoped it would, in part because cities are durable. We have to overcome the structure of the past, and some of the tools we've used up to this point are not yet up to the task. This task force really could get to that point, in part because you have two levels of expertise. You have folks who are experts in the development process, and you have folks who are experts and have lived experience in what happens after the development process. These two types of expertise are often siloed and are not in conversation, but it can be in conversation in a way that will help us not replicate the processes we've seen in some neighborhoods in Durham, as well as neighborhoods throughout the country. Growth happens. It's an amazing task force in that I don't hear any of the opponents saying they think growth isn't going to happen, that they're against change. They are saying they want deliberate change. I'm also hearing that there is a willingness to negotiate and speak through for those who are proponents of the SCAD. So I'd say that's why I'm here, why my students are learning from this situation, because it is a unique situation that can have implications across the country if done well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Deidreana Freeman. I'm just gonna be here a little while, but I did want to make sure that I did steer us in the direction to have a conversation about extending the task force meetings, and I tried to send that out earlier as an email to give you a chance to think about it and to consider it and to kind of hear back from folks on the task force if you think that might be a possibility, or if you think that would be helpful. I will say that I was just sharing from the presentation that was made at the planning commission, I just noticed that the 8 items that were presented, essentially, we've made our way through 3 of them, and there are about 5 others. And I think if we were to add an additional 2, possibly 3 meetings, we could probably get through all of them in a really good way, the way we kind of have been moving from the last meeting and hopefully in this one. Just kind of really trying to focus on what we can do to move forward that would help the development in Durham, and also addressing some of the affordability conversation as well. In short, if folks are open to that, and my co-chair is open to that, I think we can move, we'll extend our task force a little bit longer and kind of address those, not speed through them, but kind of really address them the way that we have, the way we did yesterday, the day before yesterday, for the last time. Outside of that, I am open. I was sharing the article Tiana shared regarding. I want to make sure that everybody gets a copy too. Of racial class bias in zoning and rezoning involving heavy commercial and industrial land use in Durham. This is actually based on the Durham from 1945 to 2014. It was done in 2017. I think it could be very informative in this process. And so I do want to make sure that we're elevating this. It's not just a conversation, but really being practical in it and applying a little bit of what we've seen from the past in this conversation. Those are the 2 things I would add. And when I leave, I'm going to be listening. I'll be listening virtually, just trying to keep up because I do think that this is a very important conversation that we have to leave town. And outside of that, I know that the mayor will cover us and after. And are we?
Yeah,
Okay. So I think the first thing we should probably start with is a review of the last 2 meetings, and then we can probably move forward with some remarks from the task force, and then hopefully we'll hold time because I did see a couple of emails about folks in the public that they want to speak, and so I don't want to talk all the way through. So I'm figuring that we'll give this another 10 minutes, and then the task force remarks about 30 minutes, and then if we can hold another 30 minutes for public comments, you can kind of come back to your task force remarks after that, and then go to next steps and adjourn at 6:30. Sounds good? Great. And I'm going to turn it over to our mayor.
Okay, I'm going to good evening, everybody. It's Friday, we want to hit the ground running and get some things done. What I'm here to do tonight is just basically try to tell you all what I've heard, where you all are. And then where I think you told us the other night where you were hoping to go. So the first thing is we start with group norms. Some of the things that I heard is that you like for people not to interrupt each other. You don't want to talk over each other. You don't want a long commentary. Might need to define what it means, but I heard you all say that. Stay on the subject, use your kindergarten language, limit the use of your letters. You'll see there's a small on one of your documents that you have. You should have a vocabulary on the back of it of terms that probably need to be defined. And also some of those letters. Also, people said that they like pictures, graphics, and illustrations. So think about the group norms tonight. The snapshot of the meeting that we had, logistically kind of speaking, you had about 13 to 15 participants around the table. 2 of your table mates brought in some written documents for you to review. You also had some community statements. You had 2 that were brought in, I believe, and you also had 1 person that we actually created a document from who spoke to you all last night. You also had of your folks that were sitting around the table that said they had some issues that they wanted to address. You had about 2 to 4 of those issues that were raised. They pretty much laid out kind of here. And you also had some questions going back and forth about your process, whether in fact or not this needs to have happened from a private developer. What your opponents have been saying is that, we want a part in the process, even if it did. We also want our staff involved. You got a UDO rewrite you have to consider on your implementation end. What are you gonna do with your recommendations and what are they gonna be? And then you also just heard your councilwoman talk about further task force meetings. So that's kind of where you all were last night. On this wall, you'll kind of see where we stopped. The things in stars are things that came off of the 2 documents that were given to you by your members of your task force that were not on this list last night. So this represents sort of like a written compilation of where you started from. And these are the documents that we've received so far, including the one tonight. And that's your overview. That's your snapshot. That's your snapshot. Where you are.
Okay, so if, you want to start with. We start with, task force remarks. And that kind of got us forward, back my time. We could take another 20 minutes to go through folks' remarks that might be helpful. Anyone want to start, or shall I start from left to right? Yeah.
I'll just start by saying, and I know that our goal here is to discuss some of the pieces of SCAD that we can agree on and some of the pieces that we don't agree on and kind of work through. After I left Wednesday night, I went back and just looked through the timeline of events that happened. And I still stand on SCAD needs to be canceled, if that's the right term to use. And we need to focus on the UDO changes that are coming about. And not saying that everything needs to be just thrown in the trash, but perhaps that can be looped into the UDO changes. And as I mentioned before, I do not think that this process should be led by developers. It should be led by the city or even a hired consultant, as I believe some of the expert has mentioned on Wednesday. And that's what normally happens in other cities. I think it's dangerous when you have for-profit developers that are leading something that could be impactful, dangerously impactful for the community. And I'll say one more thing and I'll pass it on. I'm an affordable housing expert, and I don't think affordable housing experts within the Durham community were consulted. I know they weren't when this document was drafted.
And Mr. Childers and Mr. Anthony. Thank you, Mr. Mark.
Good afternoon to everyone. My name is James Chavis. I'm an alternate from Ms. Burrows. And I've been a part of the keeping up with the SCAD way before it started being the SCAD. You all do not know what our developer has been doing to Durham way before our crisis came here to Durham. They was going and sneaking in changes. And now they wanted to bring it all at one time. We were then fighting it, and some of us still are trying to fight it. As you say, affordability, I would like you all to stop saying affordable and give a definition of what your term of affordable is. Like I'm going to give you my term for affordability. 60 or below. How many of these people are you really trying to work with? 70 and above. How many of these people you're actually going after? See, this is what we need to know in order to understand what your process is doing. Because some of you may not look at it like we are. Go right there on Main Street, where the county building is going on there. What did they tell us after they came into our community? And what are they doing to it now? It's telling us, you're putting stuff in our face, but you turn around behind our back and you put a knife in there. And not coming out and changing it. And this is the same thing this would do. So we got to keep this meeting going. So I see it at the bottom, but I had talked to the mayor and I said, I would like to see this task force keep going on so that we can get more understanding on both sides of the table. If both sides of the table sit in and keep on talking, we can accomplish something and not try to push, I want mine or we want ours. We want a clear and definite definition so when we bring it to the city council, they will understand that we have sit down and we have worked this together. So I'm not asking each and every one to think about that, because I'm the one for proposals. And when it come back to the council, I'll be the one to speaking. I want to see this task force keep going on until we can clear up, not just those 5 more, because there is some more in there that we need to clear up. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I failed to mention that, I know we discussed, briefly some of the projects that are pending SCAD passing. And I thought we discussed potentially discussing, naming some of those projects. And the reason why I say that is, I've shared, not in this platform, but I've shared in the past that I've received both verbal and emailed written threats from some of the proponents. And I have those documents with me this evening that I will share. But I just wanted to just note that those are some of the things that have been going on, and there's a lot that has been going on that I cannot share tonight because it's not enough time. But I stand firmly on moving this along to the UDO changes. And again, you would understand my stance if you experience what I experienced in the 10 months that I've been employed at Habit.
There's Mr. Monday. And then, I can't see your last name. Foreman. And then, May. And then Rob. What is, Mr. Anthony?
Thank you. Jim Anthony, opponent and submitter of the document. Important clarification, every municipality that I'm aware of in the state of North Carolina, certainly all are trying to have the opportunity for citizen changes to be made to the citizen initiated changes to be made to the development ordinances in any particular community. So it is not true to say that only the planning department should initiate changes. It is the users of the code, the development community, that most often encounter issues within the code, and that is why we're here. Number 2 point is that we initiated this process nearly 2 years ago, and during that period of time, we've had well over 100 community meetings, group meetings with folks to engage community. And community engagement has risen to another level with a different group of people here during these meetings. And we're frankly happy about that because we think that the document will stand up to scrutiny. Are there some flaws in it? Absolutely. Every UDO has flaws. 18 months from now is the estimate that we received in this pile from Carmisha Wallace, that UDO underwrite and rewrite is underway, is expected to last 18 months. The rewrite process is the beginning of the process. Then once the rewrite draft submitted to the public for comment, then there is an engagement period with the community that could be another 18 months. So the question before the council is going to decide what happens to this document. We have, again, no illusion about that. This is a council decision purely, what's in, what's out, or all in, all out. Fact is that the city needs housing and improvement to the development ordinance now, in our opinion, and not wait for another potentially 2 to 3 years for these corrections to be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming.
Joseph Fleming. I have tried to be quite systematic pertaining to my approach of dealing with SCAD. My position have not changed from the beginning to this particular day. I'm opposed against it. I try to clearly to define the reason why I was opposed against it. I started off dealing with the community that systematically have been impacted the most. Most have been the working class communities. I stated clearly that the negative impact will come to those particular communities. From a landscape point of view, it would change the tradition of the trajectory of those particular communities. It also, it would emphasize that those particular communities have been gentrified more than anything else. And the tax base will change systematically and extensively. Those are some of the facts in which I try to deal with. Also, I try to articulate clearly that the aspect of SCAD is supposed to bring forth or proliferate more housing. In concept, it really does not. It may proliferate much more housing for a certain group of people which they want to have projection to come to Durham or dealing with. But the aspect of what do Durham need? Durham said we need affordable homes. SCAD has not shown it will deal with affordable homes. Now we're gonna go back to something that gentleman just stated, how to define affordable homes. Pertaining to working class communities is different than from people in a high echelon economical process, different format. What's more economical to them is not necessarily economic to the person who makes 60% of their particular income. And those are the particular people in which are needed or affordable homes. Habitat for Humanity has been the main force for building housing for working class people. Last year, they only built 17. There's a particular reason why. And what price range was they? Those particular homes, $170,000. They will meet those particular people who are needing homes the most in Durham. Now, I'm not trying to stop, nor would I would take the position of other people who coming to Durham not have a house or apartment or whatever. That's not my point of view. No, I want everybody who wants to come to Durham be able to live in Durham, including poor people too. Thank you.
My name is Adam Foreman. I'm an alternate. I'm one of those new people to Durham. I recently came from New York City, where I was a senior advisor on housing to the mayor of New York City. Obviously, New York City and Durham are very different, but we share a lot of common characteristics, which is unaffordability, massive displacement, gentrification, and we're trying to tackle these issues. And I think the key ways we've seen city after city to tackle the issues of affordability are housing stability, housing subsidy, and housing supply. In New York, we've been fantastic on housing stability. We have our rent stabilization laws are the envy of the nation. On housing subsidy, we have 500,000 people live in New York City Housing Authority. We also provide $4 billion for affordable housing every year, build about 25,000 units every year. What we lack is housing supply increase. We've seen jobs increase by 30%. In the last 20 years, we've seen residents increase by 15%. Housing supply, on the other hand, has only increased by 10%. And that is where we failed, and where right now we're trying to make a key change of increasing housing supply by doing a lot of the things that you see in SCAD, changing minimum lot size, ease building of ADUs, residential and commercial zones, pulling back minimum parking requirements. We're following this roadmap, which Durham is doing, I think, fairly enviably. And I think Durham too has been fantastic on housing subsidy. The Forever Home Durham and the housing bond was extraordinary. Downtown Durham DHA plan, I think, is the envy of the country. But on housing supply, similarly, I think there's a lot to be done. And what's in here is a huge step towards that. I hear a lot of folks say, wait for the UDO, and that makes a lot of sense. But I think as public servants, we all know wait for the next thing is often don't do anything. That's kick the can down the road. You have a fantastic city planning department here who's looked through all the measures, has said, this is good, this is bad, this let's test and pull back if it doesn't work, and we'll change that in the UDO. And I think this is a really interesting opportunity to try those certain things. And if they don't work, you can change them in the UDO in 3 years. So all that said, I think you guys, I've been very impressed with the city professionalization, the incredible city housing department and city planning. And I think this is an important step forward. Thank you.
So you have to address that.
I appreciate that you've listed out very clear concepts that are important in housing: stability, subsidy, and supply. You're asking us to do that out of order, which I'm a little concerned about because our subsidy is quite low compared to the need.
For sure.
So I just want to caution thinking that we can do one part when we really do need to take a systems approach, and both the subsidy and the stabilization have not occurred. The stabilization in particular did not occur early enough, meaning many of the homes that by square footage were staying affordable no longer are. So again, I'm going to push the task force to think through systems versus going to a supply side only approach, because one, part of the reason why Lance Freeman was able to find the gentrification this is one of the papers within, or one of the authors referenced within the articles. I think one of the reasons he was unable to find it in New York is because there are these stability programs. There's rent control. There's a number of other things where people once interviewed talked about, I got to stay in place, but that wasn't always right for my family. I had to stay in a much smaller apartment. I lost choice. And given that this is already a community that looks to expand housing choices, I want us to make sure that we don't think to New York or to San Francisco for solutions. Solutions start in the South, full stop, because we will be the places that overcome the racial zoning that my colleague, Dr. Whitmore, is writing about. And I think we are the ones who will have the tools to push forward versus doing a diffusion of innovation from a place that is very different. Thank you very much.
I just want to say, I could not agree more. It has to be all of the above. It needs to be stability. Then there needs, the eviction, anti-eviction, and legal aid is a good start. There needs to be done a lot more. In terms of subsidy, there needs to be a lot more. But supply is one of the tools. Given the problem that exists, it has to be all hands on deck and all solutions. And that's exactly what I'm saying. I could not agree more. We needed more stability. We need more on subsidy, but also housing supply. And it needs to be all of the above, because it's such an extreme challenge you're dealing with right now with housing affordability. And it's not just New York. In Minneapolis and Oakland, we've seen they use all the above strategies. We're seeing rents go down. We've seen in California and Vermont and Montana, they're doing a lot of these similar SCAD amendments, and they're seeing impact. So it's all around the country. It's all three: subsidy, stability, and supply. It's got to be all three. Thank you.
I just want to make sure that we're not comparing apples to oranges. And it is really, I hear what Dr. Spurlock is saying, and that it's nice to hear of opportunities where that has worked. But we really want to make sure that for Durham, we're thinking about our state, which is North Carolina, which does preempt a lot of that. And so I just want to caution us on not making statements that don't fit for Durham.
Good evening, everyone. First, I want to say how grateful I am, even though it's been a tough week for me, like literally. I have friends and others that I'm not even getting back to on phone call because this has taken up so much of my life. I know one of the main reasons that I'm at the table like this and others is because of my lived experience. So I'm learning things about development and sidewalks, all of that. But the bottom line, I know a lot of times I sit where I sit because of what I live. And I don't take that for granted. And I also see it as an opportunity to speak for those who don't get a chance to get the table. So with that being said, as quick as I can say it, affordable housing and affordable development are two different things. I'm not talking about businesses or anything. I'm talking about the ones that where I serve as a board member and Families Moving Forward Shelter, where the staff cannot even meet the need because we have families living in cars. Teachers, fire department, who cannot even get a place at the shelter Before my family received our 6-month stay at the shelter in 2017, I was couch surfing with 5 kids and working 2 jobs. I know of individuals who definitely had the opportunity to move into Habitat homes, but her county income did not increase with the cost of living income. And now with her working her full-time county position, she works 2 side jobs. That is a total of 2 full-time jobs when she makes her 2 part-time to make her mortgage, pay her taxes, and be able to put food in her refrigerator. Because she wants to have that legacy that everybody talks about, the American dream. So though I might ask questions and people are like, okay, let's break it down for you. But those are the lives that I'm here to serve. That's what I represent, and that's what I lead.
Thank you. So I have Ross and then Noah.
Hello, Katie Ross. So just initially, I'll talk about, as Regina knows, there's nothing in SCAD that is going to help her people that are in her situation. What is true is that SCAD is intended to remove almost all regulation for developers here in Durham. That's the one thing that is consistent through all those pages. We're just going to remove regulation. There's no words in there that limits the application of the benefits of SCAD to small developers, to local developers, or to those developing any type of housing that would help Regina and people that are in her situation and the people that she's representing so well. The SCAD proponents have managed a very slick public relations campaign, of which I said the other day, 30,000, but today I'm hearing up to $100,000 on consultants and PR firms. They have managed to create an atmosphere of fear and crisis, which is not real. I have, as I said, 2 days ago, during the mayor's deep dive into affordable housing, the representative of apartment builders in the Triangle said there's an 8% vacancy rate of rental housings. 2% is considered a little tight, 3% ideal, and anything over that is an excess. Today, according to the Lee and Associates multifamily market overview, there's an 8.2% vacancy rate, and there are more units coming on the market by the end of the year, 4,900 more that are in the pipeline right now. In addition to that, as I also said, there's a prediction of 60,000 new homes needed, not today, not this decade even, but by 2050. The building that has already gone on, and that was predicted in 2020, the building that's already happened and is approved would more than make up for at least 5 to 10 years of that on the projection. So again, there is no housing shortage. There is a shortage of government housing. There's a shortage of subsidied housing. There's a shortage of affordable
Thank you,
housing,
Ms. Ross.
but there is no housing shortage. Thank you.
Who's next?
So Miller's next, but
Yeah, I would like
Real quick,
to.
that's, without being many of us, let everybody put our phone for tolerate, please. And Mr. Chapman, that's the mute button over there. Okay, good. Good. Thank you.
Very briefly, it is true that the vacancy rate has been rising for apartments overall in Durham, and that is because the expensive communities that are being constructed in downtown Durham mostly are not affordable. And so people cannot rent the units. It's not that they don't need units, and the need is there, but $1,600 a month, who's going to pay that for a 1-bedroom apartment if they're looking for affordable housing? No one. That is the problem. We're trying to get to the communities that can be developed that actually have rent controls in place they're subject to HUD rentals standards, income standards. Example being the low-income housing tax communities, which are being constructed in the area, two of which I've been associated with. Those communities, 200 units apiece. Just to clarify, the largest developers of affordable housing in the community are the LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit developers, not any other parties are contributing that amount of supply, just for clarity.
Thank you. And to the we, I just wanted to make sure you clarify, the we is,
Or,
are you saying like we, the city of Durham, we, the state, we, the?
I'm sorry, the we that I was referring to is the community of developers who are actually supplying the market with what it has the deepest need for. And those are low-income units. And the development of those communities is helped by SCAD.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Tom Miller. So I hear the development communities express concern about whether or not we should stop talking about SCAD and just concentrate on working on our UDO. That is my preferred way. It doesn't have anything to do with anybody's particular need to have change. It has to do with who gets to participate in the change and how the change is done. And I think this is an underlying flaw in SCAD that we're not going to fix around this table. But having said all of that, I am desperate to get down to the absolute, down to the nitty gritty, the line by line, see what we can do to change things and come to an agreement amongst ourselves. Let's look for that. And it has to be done provision by provision. And I'm anxious to do that. And I don't mind if the SCAD proponents are going to continue to push SCAD, even though we're working on the UDO, then I will continue to meet with any kind of moderated group to do that line by line analysis and see if we can fix things as we go. We can't do it by the end of our meeting today. We cannot do it by November 20th. It's just too dense and too detailed. But still, if it's going to be 36 months before we adopt the new UDO, and the SCAD folks want something to come out sooner than that, I'll work on it with them if they'll work on it with me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that was the last of the speakers. Does anyone else want to add? So I have Thomas and then Chapman.
Just real quick, we're 42 minutes in, so and we're still on general comments. We want to be able to look at some policy.
Yeah, I'm late, everybody. I didn't know where we were. Topher Thomas, West End, founder of Warm Houses. I just had a quick question for clarification, and then I wanted to make a comment. But the planning department has gone through SCAD, the totality of the document, the planning department. This is true, correct?
Yeah,
Yes. And they recommend 94% and 96% of the items and the rest are recommended with 200.
That's
Okay.
not.
We would not do that. No,
Not why.
we would not allow comments. We would not allow that, Ms. Rosenthal.
Okay.
Okay. Continue, please.
I asked that question because there is a process by which this is supposed to be done. And I think that process happened. I'm just hearing so many things. Right, and there's so much, this is what I'm picking up, and we're in general comments, so I feel like this is the time to say this. But there's a lot of just posturing and just talking, and there's just feelings and there's tension. I just want to name that, even though we're in like a public, I just feel like that needs to be said, right? And Tom, keep trying to bring us back to the concreteness, like let's talk about the thing. And I do appreciate that. I think that actually is important because a lot of what we're doing is not that, right? And so I just felt like I needed to say that, and that there should be trust in the planning department. That's another thing I wanted to say. You know, the planning department works really hard. We pay these folks to look at these things. I just think that that's another important thing, you know, and as somebody who works developing ADUs and works to do so as affordably as humanly possible, right? And ask anybody that I've worked with, I can stand behind that. You know, I work with these people every day and they're trying as well. And I know that. So I'm very sensitive to all these conversations and all these things about being poor, because I hate poverty. I don't think poverty should exist. I think 200 years from now, I hope people will look back on us who allowed poverty to exist and look back on us like we look back on slaveholders and say, we can't believe that we allowed that to occur. That is what I hope, because it's unacceptable, the abundance that we have. I heard what you said about living in your farm, and my time's up, but
Thank you. Just a real quick comment. We're not trying to remove regulations. We're trying to change regulations to remove barriers. None of the regulations are being removed.
Thank you. And so I'm gonna just. I think we recap it, but I'm gonna depart from you all, and I think the mayor's gonna jump in. But I do want to just give, I just want to give a kind of, I heard around the table what folks are saying, and I'm a little bit concerned because I do want to make sure that we are spending our time wisely. And so I think it's important to note that it's not helpful to be dismissive of folks and their lived experience. And it's also not helpful to be dismissive in folks' opinions. And so people can express their opinions, and that is fine. It is not fact, it is an opinion. I do want to be careful as we continue, because I do think it's important to continue, that we are focused on what we need to do here in Durham with where we are today, acknowledging the shortage of subsidized, of subsidy and stability, and then also just know, like, we just don't have the capability to do rent control outside of anything that is city owned or state owned or county owned. I do also want to make sure that I touch on, there were a couple of points that will need to be addressed. It may not happen today and may not happen here, but I do think that it's a concern to Ms. Joyner's point about the threats that she received, and that there's a lot of hostility, and I don't think it's limited to just the people who are here as opponents. And so we want to make sure that that's also called into the room. And I do want to say that I appreciate our subject matter experts sharing that there will be more data coming available in January 2024. And so if we want to kind of use this time to kind of continue this conversation, I think that's helpful. But I do want to say that there's also space to hold on or to be nothing. But it's not a foregone conclusion that this is the only way we can do everything. I also want to say again that I did suggest that the projects that need to come forward, and we use that as a test case, because it is not meant, in my opinion, I don't think it's helpful to the city to not move development forward that's helpful in creating affordable housing, especially with the shortage that we have today. That being said, I'm gonna leave y'all to this and hope that you can get through the 5 other areas, which were to kind of get some kind of either ors in place for small lots and flag lots, the parking, the neighborhood commercialized zones, the townhouses and non-conformities. And if you can cover that in the next 20 to 30 minutes, you would be great. It's surely be your coworkers. And I think you can allow, it would cut down your, the ability to have public comments a little bit, but I think it would be worth at least trying to see how far you can get.
Before you leave, can you give us just a couple of points that you wanted? Or we can put them up here. All right.
And we can probably do this simultaneously while you're responsible, get right into some of the others. So what you see over here is what we discussed the last 2 days. And for the folks that are watching and listening in, we discussed buffers. We've discussed the PATH program, ADU, sizing of the lots, accessory dwelling units, and also setbacks. And I will refer everyone to just just refer to the past two meetings, give a recap on those. We will start getting into some of the other major topics. And we'll try to discuss as much as we can. I will ask everyone to try and be possible so we can get to it and get our questions asked. Right? If everyone is okay with it, I'm going to refer to Councilmember Freeman's notes here that she did a really good job at jotting down. The 5 areas she referenced were small lots and flag lots, parking minimums, neighborhood commercial zones, townhouses, and non-conformities. Outside of those areas, were there any other major concerns that we needed to add to it? What we're going to do is I'm going to name it, and then we will have an explanation of what it is, and then we'll be able to answer concerns.
Tom Miller, I'm very concerned about what SCAD does to infill standards in established neighborhoods. And so I'd like to talk about that, and attendant on that are issues concerning, sub-issues concerning street yards and building heights, residential buildings. And also difficulties in corner lots, which is something that I've had practical experience with, and it's not been satisfactory for anyone.
I do want us to discuss, and maybe I'm just ignorant to the full document as far as where it outlined how it's going to expand affordable housing. I would like to kind of point some of that out. And to note for the record, my prior role was working for a LIHTC developer. So I have a lot of experience developing in multi-states, including Durham and Raleigh.
Thank you. I would like to add one thing. I hate to continue to deal with a dead horse, but it's not dead. But the point of matter is, when we were discussing the ADUs, I want to point out that dealing with the ADUs, and my major concern was how it can be placed again, next, adjacent to another person's lot, your neighbor per se, that we do not have a oversight survey, and nor do we have a subdivision survey when we're dealing with the ADU. So if we do not have that, if you can see why it's so concernable to me that the placement aspect is so concernable. Okay, but we don't have those two elements, so I think we need to address that, those two main elements.
Okay, and I'm gonna.
No oversight survey and no subdivision survey.
And what we'll do, we'll come back and if we don't get to it, at least we have that jotted down, because we still can provide a response to it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll go ahead and get started.
Excuse me, can I just add?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
For us.
So one of my concerns that I expressed at the end of one of our meetings was that there's no geographic limitation on the SCAD provisions, and people out in the county are very concerned about that. Again, the language is very important, because no matter what the intentions are expressed here, if it becomes a law, then the next set of developers will push it as far as they can. And also there's no language in there that I could find that limits it to the type of development that Mr. Anthony was talking about that's going to be so affordable. Everything in there can be used by any developer, out of state, in state, large, whatever they want to do. So without that kind of limiting language, it's a very difficult document to accept for.
Thank you. Can we jot down some budget? Okay.
Maybe we need to.
Thank you so much. Mr. Jaber.
My concern, it has not been brought up, a state. What about the runoff, the water runoff? No one. Houses, whatever you want to be about the runoff. Now, I've seen some bad runoff, and I got some pictures that's built in our areas about runoff. So if you don't talk about that in this does not help us at all, because where does that water come down from off the roof of someone's house and cause some damage to someone's house down below? So we need to definitely talk about runoff. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and start with the first one here. Small lots, flag lots.
You know, you can have that compilation on the sheet, it has no title. Those are some of the areas of concern that were mentioned in your last meeting. And those, we will add those. So this is the starting point from the other light. On items.
All right, so, Mr. Anthony, you're the applicant. Do you mind just giving a quick overview of small lots, flag lots?
Certainly, the point of modifying the flag lot south driveway access is to enable shared drives that are narrower, that actually will still fit the automobile that needs to drive across it.
I want to stop you real quick, if you will, and everyone, when you're speaking, make sure you speak directly into the microphone. We're having some audio issues for folks that are listening in.
Yes.
Explanation of what a small lot of flat lot
A flag lot is a lot that looks like a flagpole because the largest portion of that lot is on the back of the lot. And the driveway is the pole of the flag. So that's how it comes to be called a flag lot. That pole size makes a difference in how the lot can be subdivided from the parent tract being the primary piece of land. So the ability to shrink the driveway and shrink the thickness of the flagpole has a direct impact on where you can fit these lots and where you cannot. So the intention behind this was to facilitate a narrower access to the rear of a lot that was to be subdivided to create a second home site. And creating second home sites within the same lot enables an increase in supply without any additional infrastructure. That was the idea, remains the idea, I should say. And so when the question gets asked, how do we increase affordable housing? That is an example.
Thank you.
You have a little drawing of a flat lot and a small lot.
Miller?
I want to address small lots, which is a different issue than flag lots, although they overlap. So small lots are a creation of the EHC, and it's an incentive to create small houses that's actually working.
That's a letter, Tom, I'm gonna correct you, EAC.
But
EAC.
the Expanding Housing Choices Initiative of 2019. It's hard to be concise and kindergarten.
Gotta do it.
And so under the EHC rules that we adopted in 2019, you can take an existing residential lot and cut it up, and so long as the resulting small lots are at least 2,000 square feet and not narrower than 25 feet. The house that you can build on that lot right now can have a total floor area of 1,200 square feet. And that would include a garage if you have one. And the footprint for the lot can only be 800 square feet, and the maximum height can be 25 feet. So the way that works out is essentially it's a two-story house. It's 1,200 square feet with no garage. You can have a garage, of course, but if you have one, then it counts against your 1,200 square feet. What SCAD does is make significant changes. First of all, it would allow that house on the small lot to go to 34 feet. That's considerably taller than 25 feet. The other thing that it does is that it redefines the 1,200 square feet from total floor area to heated living area that is above grade and excludes the garage. So you will then be able to have a house that has living area that is below grade, that doesn't count to the 1,200 square feet. Presumably that would have to be contained within the 800 square foot footprint. So that's an extra 800 square feet. And you would be able to have a garage, and the house could now be with a flat roof or a shed roof can now be 3 stories tall. in my opinion, the beauty of the EHC thing is we're producing entry-level houses at 1,200 square feet. And that's what we're losing when we tear houses down to redevelop existing neighborhoods. Okay. If we allow these houses to become bigger, they cease to be entry-level houses. They become, if they have a garage that faces the street, we change the dynamic of the street. We wound up with snout houses, and I realize this is what the residential development community across the country seems to want to build, but I don't think it's right. Now, there are issues with the EHC small houses because they are being used as a tool for gentrification and displacement. We need to monitor that. But I'm against SCAD's changes to the small lot rules. I think what we have right now is fine, and we need to be watching it.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask all of us, including you, Mr. Miller, to let's try and make our comments a bit more succinct. Let's get to the concerns so we can make sure we get more comments in and be able to actually discuss it. So really good points. Again, I'm going to remind our audience that we will not tolerate outbursts. Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to respond?
I have a question.
Yes.
As we keep diving, it is a very technical subject that we're dealing with. And there's only a few of us who are really builders at this table. So I think we should give them a little grace. I know we're trying to speed it up, but we should really understand all of this, what's going on. I mean, I've sat in meetings and some of us have, some of us not. So I just appreciate a little grace when people are trying to explain so that we walk out of here understanding it's not just paper.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Frederick. We have a lot of people around the table, and if it's going to take 5 to 10 minutes for one comment, and then you won't be able to talk about anything else, that's going to create another issue. So my goal is to ensure that we can actually have a conversation. So we actually being pretty generous with it. You don't hear me with the timer on the comments, but I do want us to really get through something. And so my goal is to moderate a conversation here. Is there a response to Mr. Miller's concern from any of the applicants or proponents?
I have a question. I have a statement. What he just stated, and I stated in the first time, that is what we used to call shotgun houses. Okay? But shotgun houses had a way to get in and a way to get out. The way they build in these shotgun houses, you only can go in and hope nothing happens so you can come out. You don't believe it, go around Durham and look and see. That's the only way you're gonna understand what some of us are talking about and what some of us is going through and what some of us has been through. So you talking about them upright shot houses they are building. Go through it, park your car, hope that nothing happens. We don't have a fire department in this room. We don't have nothing talking about safety in this room. We don't have a police department talking about nothing. No transportation on this, nothing. But we want to make these changes and we can't ask these people, how is it going to affect their job along with what we want? We're just saying we want this, but what about these other people that have jobs? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to just address Tom's comments briefly that a daylight basement would meet the building code by having one side at least of glass and windows to allow for a legal residential unit. That is not taking up any additional land, and that's why we've asked for that. Number two, the additional height that we're asking for is to accomplish essentially the same thing. To put another floor enables the construction of more bedrooms and or perhaps a living unit. So that's why.
And again, though, but you will result in a bigger house. excuse me, will result in a bigger house. And I said, the beauty of the EHC small lot option is that we're building houses in what I call the bottom rung of the wealth ladder. If you allow those houses to be 2,000 square feet, you move that bottom rung up and fewer people are going to reach it. I've been through a lot of these small houses because I'm intensely interested in them. My very first house in Durham was 980 square feet. It was 2.5 bedrooms. Technically, they said it was 3, but one was 6 by 7. These houses are 2 and 3 bedrooms. They're building really lovely ones very close to me that are 3 bedrooms and 2.5 baths. Why that house needs to have an extra floor and below grade living space and a garage means that you're just creating a dwelling unit that is further away from people who might be able to enter the housing. And I think that it's a new thing. We don't need to change it, because if we do, I think we're destroying actually the only good thing about the EHC.
Or that additional space might be a separate ADU unit within that house.
And I'll just chime in on this because we operate based on the rules and the boundaries that exist. So right now I'm building a duplex on a small lot that's 1,200 square feet because 1,200 square feet is the max, meaning that each side of that duplex is 600 square feet. And that's going to cost me a certain amount to build. There are certain upfront costs for development, a water sewer tap, subdivision, a plat, all these different things, right? Now to add 400 square feet, so let's say we bump it up to 2,000 because SCAD passes. Now we have 2 units that are 1,000 square feet. 1,000 square feet does live better than 600. I do 600 because 600 is the max that I can do in a duplex for that size, right? But adding that extra 400 square feet has a lower cost, makes it a lower cost per square foot to what I'm providing, and likely a better quality of life. With that 400 square feet could come closets, could come just more living space. That in the 600 square foot units, as much as I love them because I do build them and I appreciate them, I think they're providing something that's really valuable. It can be nice to provide something a little bit bigger. That's not to say I won't still build 160 square foot units, because I still think there's a place in the market for very, very, very tiny homes and that people need those as well. So by expanding, creativity is allowed to happen. And it's not to say that everybody's going to operate on this mode of just purely capitalistic profit. Now, many people will, so I don't want to disavow it. I know that is true.
A question for the proponents. Are you saying that the SCAD document or the SCAD process will add additional housing that will be affordable, but there'll be small homes?
Yes.
So to me, that's a problem when it comes to housing choice. If we're looking at just adding small homes for affordability, that's not an appropriate model for affordable housing. You want to lean towards housing choice. You have a lot of families, as you mentioned, at families moving forward. There's a lot of families that lack affordable housing. In my prior role, I wore a lot of hats. I led the coordinated entry system in Durham that addressed homelessness in Durham. And so I'm very aware of the needs of the homeless individuals that are lacking housing because of lack of affordable housing. And many of them are not looking for small homes.
Which is exactly why we're asking for 1,200 square feet as the new cap, so we can get 3 bedrooms.
Point of clarification. Someone passed me a card. Someone passed me a card that shows a small lot home at 1,000 or at just under 1,200 square feet, and it's going for $295. Is that also, because it's built, it's new construction? What's the price point of entry? Because new construction is expensive. Money to borrow is expensive. The questions that are asking are often affordable to whom, and I think if you could give people a range at what that will enter into market will help the conversation move forward. Thank you.
And I can just speak to that from my personal unit. So the units that we're building that are about 600 square feet, typically there's 2-bed, 1-bath, we're renting those for about $900, between $800 and $900 a month. And so that's coming in, meeting the range of somebody who makes about 50% AMI. So right now,
The 1,200, the 1,000.
I'm not building those, so I can't speak to that. Yeah.
what I would like to speak on is the aspects. In the last 4 years, Raleigh went through a process in which they was trying to, or at least they were protesting because the contour of the neighborhood was changing. And some folks in that particular neighborhood were trying to build certain type of houses, private individuals were trying to build certain type of houses, were going to change the contour of the house. It was not fitting in with the rest of the houses. Now, what I see in Durham, based on what is getting built, most of the older houses that's in the neighborhood, I still can say, I think I have enough statistics to substantiate what I'm going to say, is that many older homes still can be renovated and be kept within the neighborhood, where it's more feasible for certain elements to eliminate those older homes, even though they have a chance to be remodeled and can be remodeled and can be saved. My problem is this. We are really changing the contour of many neighborhoods, marginalized neighborhoods. We are really changing the continuity of those particular neighborhoods because it's more feasible for those houses getting knocked down, even though they can be saved. And it will not change the threshold a heck of a lot pertaining to the price range of those housing, and will still make room for other people who want still affordable homes to be able to stay there, stay in a more traditional type home, and have basically more living space overall. That's my point. I'm concerned about that.
Sure.
I just want to add one point and commend Topher. I think what you're doing is good, right? But the concern is not everyone is going to rent at the rate that you're looking to rent. And so we're opening up that for any and everybody.
And if I will just interject, what I just based on live meeting and tonight, I think that what we're starting to identify is intent versus actual. So we have some proposals here. We have some really good actors, people doing some really good work. What I hear from the opponents is, you guys are great. How can we put parameters around what you're doing? And what I hear from the industry experts is, listen, we're just trying to do what's good. So I think, which we won't get to tonight, it just sounds like we're going to be able to identify that problem we're trying to solve, which is, don't let it turn into the Wild Wild West. We're trying to take care of Durham, removing some of these regulations that make the good intentions really hard to accomplish. I want to put that out there. Attorney Showers.
I just wanted to make a quick clarification that when you talk about AMI, you should really say what family size you're talking about.
Right.
So that we know what we're talking about. We've already heard comments that we need housing for families, so what AMI do you provide that rate to? Is it 2 family, 2 children, 2 people?
Yes, 2 people is what I'm.
Adults? No children?
And that's specifically the size units that I build typically. I mean, we've had families of 4 living in our units. But that's usually when we have those in mind, we're not usually imagining a family of 4 living in 600 square feet as somebody with a family of 4. I know how hard that is. Then I also know 600 square feet is better than a car. And so.
Cheers.
Yeah. I'm saying this because just like what you were saying, you take a traditional house on a lot, and you tear that house down, and the houses you're planning on building supposed to be affordable to who? That's what I'm trying to get at, because row houses, as I see what's going on in Durham, these row houses on that same lot that one house was on, and you're taking 4 and 5 and 6 houses, or row houses, and put them on there, but the prices are running higher than that one house that was there. That could be remodeled and kept like you said. Now, if you're gonna tear that house down and rebuild some more houses, what affordability are you making those 6 or 4 houses to enhance people here in Durham to stay there? That's what I'm looking at. We see it all over Durham. You're tearing down one area, one house, and putting 4 or 5 in there, but the people in that area can't stay there. So please, think about what you're saying.
So as suspected, it's unrealistic to try and cover all of these topics. And we have 15 minutes left. So we can try to address one more topic, or we could focus on what recommendations we'd like to provide. It's perhaps sort of trying to take down the concerns. And I'm going to ask that, if we haven't so far, which we haven't addressed everything, I'm going to ask that moving forward, we do try and document those concerns from each person. And I'm going to step beyond my authority here and ask the opponent if you would also respond to those. We can send that out to everyone. I hope that would be okay, because everyone is showing good faith and having a great conversation here. So would you all like to try to address one more point, or would we try and just try to figure out next steps?
I personally would like to discuss the affordability, how, again, I keep saying it, how SCAD is going to bring more affordable housing opportunities. I'll just say here at Habitat, we are struggling to continue our model of providing affordable homeownership because Durham is expensive. And even with our smaller homes, our skinny, responsibly dense homes on Skinny Plum are expensive. So I'm really interested in how I'm going to assist in providing additional home ownership opportunities that are affordable. And when I say affordable, that's the customers that we serve.
John?
I've got a lot of experience developing affordable houses. Project in Winmore was one of the first high-end subdivisions to ever have a LIHTC apartment complex right in the middle of it, and all over in Florida and North Carolina. It's in the thousands of units. Secret to affordable housing is 4 parts. One is low-cost land. The second is long-term financing. The third is low interest rates. And the fourth is efficient construction. And if you could bring in the fifth, which would be nonprofit sponsorship, you can really do it. And you can do that with Habitat. And so what we're mostly talking about here is reducing the cost of land. Because if you can densify, if you can put more houses on existing property that already has streets, already has sewer, already has water, that is going to reduce, you're talking about a 20% of the cost is the land cost. And if you restrict housing, which is what we've been doing, the result is prices go up and it becomes more difficult for people to stay. And right now, the easiest thing is to buy an existing house and knock it down. It's all in the current code. We're talking about a different approach, a finer grain approach, which involves building more interesting places that are more creative. Thanks. Except for Bob, I've been a close observer of the real estate industry in the state for a very, very long time. As the chief regulator of the industry in the Attorney General's office. And with a possible exception of nonprofit developers, housing is sold, it's not sold on a cost plus basis, it's sold on a what the market will bear basis. SCAD doesn't make any differentiation of that. And what it does is it will create building opportunities for the people who already have the opportunities, and they'll be able to exploit it and sell property for what the market will bear. What the market bears is a function of supply and demand. And if you reduce the supply, the price goes up.
Well, I just like to say there's plenty of statistics that disprove what you're saying in terms of if massive building bringing down the cost, that is not happening. But the answers I should have been getting from you and Mr. Anthony, when I was talking about what's restricting the benefits to builders and developers in SCAD to small developers like Mr. Thomas or to low-income housing, for you to read the language in SCAD that does that, and you haven't done it. And I believe because it's not there, and therefore, everything you're saying, maybe you would do it, but there's, as Topher has stated, there's many developers that aren't gonna do it that way. They're gonna go in and be it build as densely as possible, as recklessly as possible, tear downs, all of that, gentrification. Because SCAD will allow them to do it. There won't be oversight, there won't be the regulations, there won't be a site plan necessary. It will be administratively approved, that even the electeds won't see it until the devastation is done. And so that's the problem, and that's the problem with the lack of trust. Like I said at my very first comment here, if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage, if it's not in the ordinance describing who's going to use it, who's going to benefit, then it will be exploited for sure.
Thank you, Ms. Frederick.
Yes, I lost train of thought, but I just wanted to go back to something Jackie said. One house knocking down is just not one house, it's a family's generation. And I'm living with that next door to me. One house down, 4 next to me, I can't even get out of my driveway because there is no kind of regulations. So can you explain, we're talking about small lots, so this could be repeated all through Durham. And then we have the burden of trying to pay to ramify it. That's us, the people who live there. So there's no language that says, if this building that you're planning causes harm, safety issues, who carries the burden? The builder, because they're gone. The neighbors, it's not their fault, they just wanted to move in a house. Because proper foresight was not in the plans. And that's what we're asking for, foresight, and we want to see some projects. So we could be, maybe this could be a really pivotal point in Durham. Let's not blow it by moving too fast.
I agree with everything you just said.
So there's a question raised about, would this also apply to large development projects? And if you look at what we're talking about here tonight and have been prior, we're discussing small lot development, small building development, additional development on infill lots. None of this conversation loosens anything for larger projects. Your question would be, perhaps, can somebody go into a subdivision of half acre in city limits, but out in the suburbs, and start carving those into smaller lots? Will depend on that neighborhood, and land use restrictions might exist in that neighborhood. There are things like covenants and restrictions that may be imposed on their project. Those don't exist in the city, and that's why we're addressing the ability to create these small lots, flag lots, ADUs. The conversation that we're having is really only for those type of developments, not the suburbs.
Mr. Chambers spoke about the aspect, how the fire department is going to deal with certain aspect of the way the house formation and land formation is now with this new development. One thing that I would like to address, and I want people to keep it in mind, is that when it comes down to water runoff, and that's a major concern, water runoff can damage other people's lands process based on, because it cannot flow in a natural formation. Now, Durham had made it clear when certain water damages comes about in that capacity, it's not the builder's fault. It's not the builder's responsibility no longer. He or she did their work and moved on. It still comes down to the owner's responsibility. That's the owner's problem. Now, this is a stone fact. Now, my concern is simply this, if you make certain things certain ways, that it's going to escalate the process is going to cause a much more feasible damage to other people's landscape, then, somebody else should be probably held accountable based on the architectural aspect of it. But the point of the matter is the landowner or the homeowner responsibility to deal with that particular problem overall. The last thing I would like to address is that still it comes down to one particular thing. We still must be concerned how things are getting made, how the formation is, how the architectural process can fit into that community. Will it be more harm to the community, or will it be a safer haven? Right now, many things where I see it can be a more detriment overall. Thank you.
Hey, everybody, I'm trying to get us to the point where we can get out of here on Friday night at a good time. So we're gonna focus in on our next steps and I'll try to capsulize. We will make sure that you get an updated version and some of these versions will come a little bit more than a working kind of document. So you have those for your perusal. I do want to kind of identify a couple of topics for us to think about. One, I think that has been raised, but we still not have addressed is the actual tensions that this process has brought about between the development community and the citizenry who are concerned about that. And I do think that you all need to talk about it. We'll start with Mr. Anthony. I know one of the questions that I have in my mind would be, well, why Durham? You don't live in Durham, so why was Durham the place that you came to work with our planning department on this initiative? And I don't want you to answer that now, but I know that's one of the questions I normally get. The other one would have to deal with the trust or non-trust of our planning department. And that's something trust is earned and built. And I think part of the relationship that have been severed is that there is a perception out there in the Durham community that our planning department was talked to a lot more than their citizens, right? I know one of the first things that I had was that the planning department did not really talk with regular citizens as much as they had talked to the SCAD developers. So I do think that you all need to kind of address those issues. Then you had the coupling of that with what happened with Habitat. So trust was completely broken at that point, right? So, but as you see tonight, everybody's sitting around the table and talking about it, and communications is key. There's also a level of education in my mind that has to be addressed in terms of, let's be honest, in the Black community, we were left out of the building of cities.
Yeah.
We were not a part of that.
No.
We have very few experts in that arena, and you have a 400-year start. You cannot ignore that fact for people of color. So when I keep asking you all to bring your language down, help us to understand it. I have a couple of degrees, but this is a whole different vocabulary and language and experiences that most of us who are of color have never dealt with on any level at all. Because a lot of us don't build even our own homes. We rent primarily. So you cannot ignore that. And that creates a part of the trust, because African Americans have never been stable in housing since we crossed into this country, and we still are housing insecure. You cannot ignore that basic fact. Okay, and a lot of the things that have happened with the building, you see a lot of building going on, but we have not been able to afford it. That's just a fact. So we've got to be making sure that we're clear. So you have language, you have trust, and the educational process, I think, under that. The next step is, what do you all want to do? You have done a remarkable amount of work in like 5 hours, 5 or 6 hours. And so you need to decide how much of a personal investment you want to put into this effort. You know that the city always has task force. You always do task force. I just headed one. It took us 18 months. They're normally like not 3 meetings. You have a mission, it's a long time, and you sit down and you delve, you have community input. So you'll get because we're at 6:29, you'll get some information asking of your interest and when you can be available, okay? So I would suggest that we try to have at least one more meeting before the November 20th council meeting so that you can get a chance to speak to council to tell them about this process. And by then, we will have some information about whether you want to continue it or not. So we'll be in touch by email. We thank you all for the time that you've had tonight. You've done a remarkable job. We give fans a round of applause. We thank our co-chairs for leading this effort. We thank our two professors who have done a lot. And of course, we thank Durham, North Carolina for being concerned about this on a Friday night. We'll be in touch. Everybody think about those things and how we can continue to build this conversation. Have a good Friday night.
Thank you all. Thank you.